I'm going to give a few updates on the libp2p core fund that we announced in November. I'm going to talk about libp2p retro PGF a little bit. Then some updates on structuring the libp2p Foundation. And I want to end with a libp2p advisory working group that I'm going to be recruiting a range of advisors from across the community to come join. So just as a reminder, libp2p is a large-scale project that powers a ton of projects in the world, primarily adopted in the Web3 ecosystem to support a ton of blockchains. I'll show that in a moment. Has a ton of different implementations, lots of contributors, and so on. We have like hundreds of thousands of nodes per month. There's probably many more out there that we just don't have any visibility into. And certainly, certain hacks that some of us have made have spun up millions at times. So lots of things use libp2p. In November, we kind of showed this. These market caps are from November, so they're not updated. These have all grown. This is all of the value that's being secured by libp2p implementations. So huge kudos to the implementers. And as of today, it's over 400 billion in value secured by libp2p. So from November to now, thanks to the macro environment, interest rates changing, this went from 300 to 400, which should make us put marginally, that much 33% more effort into securing the software. So anyway, libp2p is built out of a lot of implementations, lots of different languages, tons of people, organizations, groups contribute, which is really, really awesome. It's a project that's technically about, it got ripped out of IPFS in 2016, I want to say, ish. So it's coming up on 8 years ish. But the first code in Go libp2p is 10 years old now. So the very early stack there is there. It has a lot of potential well beyond blockchains and Web3. It could be a new stack for lots of protocols and projects everywhere. But there's a lot of work to do to sort of get there. There's hundreds of open source contributors to libp2p around the globe. People build, maintain implementations. People do a lot of research that ends up turning into protocols. The libp2p community is also a great home to support a lot of that collaboration and a lot of that kind of investigation of different protocols. People are coming together to kind of advance peer-to-peer tech through libp2p. You already heard about the community upgrades. If you're watching this in the video in the future, there's another talk that you should watch from Dave and Prithvi. Go check that out. Great. So in November, we announced that we wanted to build two things, the libp2p Foundation and the libp2p Core Fund. We've been working more on the Core Fund initially to just get the pipes of money flowing to teams. And the Foundation work is a little bit further out. I'll talk first about the fund. So the goal of the libp2p Core Fund is to create a crypto-native funding structure for libp2p to be able to raise funding from libp2p stakeholders or receive funding from automated programs and then route it to implementer groups. So really think of the Core Fund as just a router object. It is meant to leverage community decision-making programs. It's meant to deploy funding to teams and projects. And it's going to be using a mix of proactive and retroactive mechanisms. In November last year, the update then was that we announced the plan for the fund. We developed the 3-program structure. We secured PL funding, and we announced it. Since then, now in February, we are the Open Impact Foundation is an organization that got booted up that is enabling a lot of different kind of groups that are doing community-oriented funding structures. And I'll talk about that in a moment. We're using the OIF to instantiate the libp2p Core Fund. And now the OIF cell is live, which I'm really happy to report. We're also, I'm going to talk a little bit about fundraising for libp2p. Some really good news from the Optimism community. And I'll talk a little bit about the programs. So just a quick recap of what the libp2p Core Fund is meant to do. We really want this to be a router in a large network of funding structures from funder groups into the teams and people and projects that develop libp2p. We specifically want to separate out the fund from the foundation to enable a robust landscape of other potential funds that could develop. So we want to make sure that the governance of the project is separate from the funding rails. The funding rails, there should be a lot of competition for that. we're just booting up the first one and getting it going. But over time, it would be great if like other people create other funds. We also anticipate that we'll help boot up other kind of funds that route money in libp2p, and that the core fund itself would be a funder of those funds. So yeah, this is kind of like the kind of highly networked funding structures that crypto can enable. The structure for the libp2p core fund has 3 programs that we're going to be developing. The first one that we're going to be launching is the RetroPGF one. These 3 programs are DAO voting, GP voting, and RetroPGF. You can think of GP voting as just like the traditional grant program where there's a set of people in the group that kind of review application proposals, and then kind of they, with their knowledge of the project and the stakeholders and what matters, decide. So that's kind of like the basic, kind of traditional grant program. The DAO voting, you can think of that as like the quadratic voting style thing that DAOs do, or even other mechanisms, not necessarily quadratic voting. And then RetroPGF is a retroactive funding structure. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So yeah, this is kind of like a view into like the 3 protocols and kind of what the purpose for each of them is. We really want to leverage the community participation to route the funding for libp2p. Ideally, over time, the kind of singular grant program could like decrease. Our goal is to make. We're going to start with like a 33% split across the board, so like a third, a third, a third. It would be great if over time, like the kind of prospective community voting and the retro funding is like the majority of it, and like the fund is like almost doing. It's just doing the routing for the community. Cool. So I mentioned the core fund now exists, which is really cool. We have this kind of like modular, compartmentalized structure for OAF cells, and now we have a money router. So for libp2p folks, you can now like send packets of money through the router to projects. We're in the process of booting up the programs to make that routing efficient. When I showed this in November, when we kind of booted up this plan, I talked about like this fundraising. We haven't yet kicked off the proper fundraising program, and the Optimism RetroPGF program happened and funded libp2p. So huge kudos to the Optimism community for joining the funding structure for libp2p. I'll talk a little bit more about the program in a moment because I want to give you a sense of how ours is going to work. So this is pretty exciting. We have like achieved continuity, which is really great. But we have a lot more to go. So if there are projects that want to support the growth of libp2p, your logo could join the set here. We'll be kicking off a fundraising program for this sometime in the next month or 2. So stay tuned on that. I'll talk a bit about RetroPGF because we're going to be using the program ourselves. So this is a crypto-native model for how to do funding in communities. It's structured in terms of rounds. It leverages a lot of community insight into deciding the structure. But the key thing is that it's retroactive, meaning the funding happens after the impact, not prospective beforehand. RetroPGF is structured in a set of rounds. Usually there's two rounds per year in the Optimism version. It creates a cycle structure that gives you a kind of feedback and improvement loop. It lets you test and scale things. And that creates a really good, well-timed box attention moments. The Optimism structure has been super successful so far. The first round was kind of like getting the beginnings of the program going. It's just been 3 rounds, and by now there's 500 projects that are being funded through OP. And the amount of funding is massive, right? So we're talking about like, in the last round there was 30 million OP distributed, which I think as of today, that's like 3.8, 30 times 3.8. You can do the math, that are 100 and something million-ish dollars distributed out to 500 projects. And so like projects like libp2p are huge beneficiaries of this. So many other important public goods are getting funded this way. The rounds work as follows. So for each round, you select a set of batch holders. There are important decision makers in the community that have a lot of visibility on what's important to fund for that community. Those batch holders then review a set of applications that get submitted by project applicants. The batch holders vote on those applications. The results are calculated, published. Then the funds are distributed. And then after that, really critical, you reflect and improve the system. So that discussion and reflection is really key to make sure that the program over time iterates into something that supports the growth of the community. Here's a view into kind of like a ton of the projects and programs that got funded by Optimism. And it's just super cool that this is working. Like we haven't even kicked off the fundraising process for libp2p, and like boom, like already kind of the whole community that depends on libp2p recognized the importance of libp2p and funded it as a public good, which is super exciting. So thank you to the Optimism community for doing this, and also for inspiring us, because we're going to be building our own version of this program for libp2p. The time frame, we're kind of aiming March and April to be where we're doing the first round. We're going to be using software from the Gitcoin community called Easy Retro PGF. We're going to be putting out a call for batch holders for the libp2p community. We're going to primarily look at kind of implementers right now, and maybe some key project stakeholders. Then from there, we'll expand the batch holder set. We'll do a first round that'll be kind of like small, to just kind of training wheels, get it going, and then after that, we'll do a second larger round. We'll likely deploy a chunk of the RetroPGF funding from the Optimism community through RetroPGF itself. The more we can get raised, the more will be distributed that way. So the goal would be to run at least 2 to 3 rounds this year. That would be pretty great to kind of get this pipeline working. Cool. So yeah, I already kind of touched on this. So if the key thing here will be getting these projects that depend massively on libp2p to help contribute to the project. So if all of you are either in those projects or connected to those projects, help raise awareness about libp2p, help raise awareness that we're going to be doing this fundraising to help drive a lot of improvement. And not just that, help let us know what are the kinds of things that should be funded. So you'll be able to do that through RetroPGF or the DAO voting structure. Cool. So I already kind of described a bit of this. The goal is to kind of just kick off the program structure and have it rolling. And then after that, we'll be kind of scaling it from there. Cool. So that's a lot of good updates on the funding side. We are currently going through the process of structuring the foundation. We'll have more news about this maybe in a few months. And we have to come up with a good model for how do we govern the protocol. The good news for libp2p is that most of it is just specs online that don't disagree with each other. So we don't need any kind of hard decision making. So that pushes all of the decision making to the edges, because if you don't like a protocol, just create a new spec, no problem. libp2p is meant to be this bag of protocols that lets you do that. There is some core governance of the project itself that's important. And so we'll be thinking through how to do that. How we'll be thinking through it? With a libp2p advisory group. I'll get to that in a moment. As we talked in November, libp2p is this amazing triumph of the crypto community coming together. And this, once we kind of ship the foundation and set it up well, will be a good long-term structure housing the project. And kind of the goals of the foundation will be to kind of have this independent project governance body to kind of drive the project mission and vision. You'll hear later from Raul today about kind of a vision and roadmap for the project. It oversees the spec and community processes, custodies the brand, trademark, and so on. And it helps drive network innovation, maintains community infra. But ideally, the foundation does all of it through other teams. The foundation itself is meant to be this very small, lightweight thing that leverages the broader community to do everything. OK, great. Last but not least, I'm going to form this libp2p advisory working group. It's not formed yet, but just stay tuned. If you want to kind of have a lot of input into how to run the libp2p project and what's important to do, come join that. However, if you come join it to give opinions, you're also going to be asked to do a bit of work for the libp2p community. So contributions for, you can give your opinion and route the project with a little bit of help and support. And we'll be putting out a call for people that want to join this working group later on. Great. So that is it. Any questions? Yeah, back there. Yeah, so it's really just kind of meant to be a, there's not going to be any large formal structure there. It's really kind of grouping a set of people that really care about the future of libp2p and understand the project really well to help inform what we should do. So that means review certain things, give opinion, help write some things, write some blog posts, talk about things, maybe give talks in certain places, help decide some complex things, help adjust like the timing of things, help be batch holders, like that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like important contributions to the project that require a lot of like knowledge about the project and insight. And it's meant to be kind of like fast coordination oriented. Like there's a lot of people that are big parts of the libp2p project that happen to have very little time. So for example, think of like implementers in say the Ethereum core developers and Falcon core developers and so on, who like have little time for libp2p but really know and really care what matters. And so we want to create a kind of like a time optimized way for them to like give some amount of opinion and help out in some cases. Cool. Yeah, another question?
I was at the IPFS like main event yesterday. We were talking a bit about like what are the kind of triggering events if IPFS Foundation, for example, doesn't reach its funding goals from the community. Can you speak a bit about like what happens here? libp2p doesn't reach its kind of like target community maintenance amount?
We achieved it.
I mean, like moving on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so currently there's so you're saying like in general what would happen if we don't raise it? Well, like the implementer teams that are trying to implement things don't have funding, and then those teams then have to go do other stuff. Yeah, so like with all software and with all public goods, if the people working on the thing aren't able to get and find funding to do the thing, then they will go choose to do something else, right? Yeah, but again, this is like highly networked, right? So this is kind of a decision for each of these teams. Each of these teams, some of these are housed in other teams, some of these teams are doing contracting work with other groups, some of these teams like work on other projects, and so it's kind of like on a per team decision making. This kind of continuity structure that we described is based on like some core. After surveying the landscape, there's a set of core things that help maintain the project, and that's kind of like where this figure came from, that continuity figure. And so the good news here is like, hey, we've got it for 2024. We don't have it for 2025 yet, but it would be great to like, raise more this year to both like give continuity to the next year, but also to start growing the project. Because the project has been like tragically underserved for the last 5 years or so. Like it's always been kind of like the third or fourth priority of all the organizations supporting it, and it's been like holding the project back. And so I really want to get us into a spot where the project itself has its own funding, and the stakeholders of the project itself can like, and the implementers can like decide what to do and how to grow the project. Yep.
Thank you so much. Very admire a lot of your work from many years. Just wanted to know if what is community related, the grants and the partnership with Bitcoin and all that. Where is there a space for the partnership with universities, students? We did some sessions on IPFS for creators at University of Florida, and right now it's a very well-positioned university from Florida to all over the world. We created the blockchain lab 2 years ago. So I was wondering how can these community processes and all these engagements kind of work out with students and
Yeah. So I would say like that's a good kind of thing to propose to the community openly on GitHub, and then see what engagement you get from the community. And if the community wants to fund those kinds of programs, the community will. We don't currently have the prospective funding structure yet. Only we're going to build the retroactive one first, the prospective one later in the year. So this was probably like Q3. So we'll kind of like build the retrospective structure in Q2, and then we'll build the prospective structure in Q3. Cool. Yep.
Thanks for sharing. And then, knowledge is that where new funding is not going to be used to implement the new features, or it's going to be used to manage to maintain the current.
Oh, well, it depends on the scale, right? So this is kind of like continuity means maintenance achieved. raising more gets us to build more things. Yeah, so like we really, there's so much to do in the libp2p ecosystem. You know, all kinds of like observability tooling and new implementations and new protocols and lots of like really good stuff that we want to grow. We just need to both like, we need to find a way of supporting the teams that need to do that. So yeah, so that's what this is about. Cool, any other thoughts? All right, great, thanks so much.